Spring is one of the most beautiful seasons for landscape photography, but if you're not sure what to shoot or how to set up your camera, this video is for you. I'll share 3 stunning subjects to explore this spring, with practical tips on composition, lighting and camera settings to help you nail each shot. Let's start with the obvious one: flowers. Whether it's wildflowers in a field, cherry blossoms or garden blooms, spring is full of photogenic scenes just waiting to be captured. So keep your eyes open even when you're just walking through a patch of grass. Once you spot something interesting, get closer and lower to create a more immersive, intimate perspective. To shoot close to the ground, I usually rest my camera on a sandbag like this. Composition-wise, flowers are relatively easy to work with. To really make your subject pop, you want to separate it from the background. There are 2 simple ways to do that. Use a shallow depth of field, so your subject stays sharp while the background blurs into a soft wash of color. Or you can also shoot during golden hour with backlight. Letting the sun hit your subject from behind creates a beautiful glow and adds more depth. I prefer manual focus, making sure I focus on the center of the flower. But manual focus is also required if I plan to focus stack for maximum sharpness from front to back. Be mindful what's behind your subject. Leave some space to avoid distractions. You can absolutely include background elements like these nice looking bouquet balls. Just keep it clean and uncluttered. For that creamy, soft background, use a wide aperture. f4 is a good starting point, but if your lens opens wider, go for it. Just keep in mind that the wider you go, the more selective your focus becomes. That means not all parts of your subject may be in focus. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it just depends on the look you're going for. If f4 is the biggest you got and the background isn't soft enough for your taste, you can always try Lightroom's lens blur tool, making the background smoother this way. You don't need a macro lens for this kind of shot. Something like a standard 50mm kit lens works great already. I love using my Canon 24-105mm as it gives me plenty of flexibility, and I usually end up shooting around 100mm for flowers. To keep images sharp, especially handheld or using a sandbag, I'll stick with shorter shutter speeds around 1/50th of a second or faster. If the exposure is too dark, feel free to raise your ISO. I try to stay around 100 to 200, but I really have no problem going up to like ISO 3200 if needed, especially with Lightroom's AID noise. Noise is barely an issue anymore. Next up, forests. After a long winter, trees burst with fresh green leaves. Forests are perfect for soft, moody light, especially after rain, on foggy mornings or even during golden hour when the low sun comes through the trees. Golden hour, at least for me, makes it also much easier to find compositions in what can otherwise be a very chaotic environment. To start building a composition, first you should look for leading lines. That could be paths, tree trunks or even shadows. In this case, I'm shooting into the sun, so the tree shadows help draw the viewer's eye into the image. I'm also using trees at the edges of the frame to reduce distractions, and this also creates a very nice natural frame for the wild garlic and the stream in the middle. Now for the eye catcher, I want to include a sunstar. These appear when you shoot directly into the sun using a small aperture. Something around f16 usually works pretty good. The trick is delicate positioning. If you include too much of the sun, you will end up with an overexposed blob. This does not look good. But if you partially hide it behind the tree, you'll get a crisp, clean sunstar. If you want to shoot sunstars, make sure to remove any filters, because shooting into the sun with those extra layers of glass can and will cause unwanted glare. And these are super hard to clean up. Also, the lens matters. Sunstars tend to look better with wide-angle lenses. And since I need to capture the trees, the garlic and the sky in one frame, I'm using my 9mm ultra-wide lens, which also happens to produce these very beautiful crisp sunstars. The small aperture gives great depth and sharpness, but it's also darkening the image, so you need to adjust your shutter speed and ISO. Again, I suggest to rather crank up the ISO a bit more to keep the shutter speed faster, since for this scene in particular there are a few kind of fast moving things, so with a shorter shutter speed I can keep those sharp. Also, I recommend using a tripod for maximum sharpness. Because of the contrast we have here in this scene between the bright highlights and the deep shadows, it's a good idea to shoot an exposure bracket for HDR blending later. This way we can make sure the exposure looks nice and there aren't any clipped areas in the darkest or the brightest parts of the image. Of course, except for the sun, which will always be overexposed. And if you're working with close foreground elements, you may need to focus stack, otherwise focusing about 1/3 into the scene is usually a good starting point for sharp images. Last but not least, rolling hills. Spring brings soft textures, lush greens and dramatic skies that work beautifully with these gentle landscapes. One of my favorite things is creating these minimalistic scenes with a single tree on a hilltop. And the great thing is, you don't always have to wait for golden hour or that perfect sunset. On partly cloudy days, just wait for the sun to break through and selectively light up parts of the land. This creates beautiful depth and makes those fresh greens pop. But of course, a colorful sunset works just as well. For composition, I use the rule of thirds to balance sky and land. Most cameras have a built-in grid when using the live view to help with this. I usually position the horizon lower in the frame to emphasize the landscape over the sky. But that also isn't set in stone. Longer focal lengths help compress the scene and enhance that minimal dreamy look. That said, wide-angle lenses can work too. It just depends on how far away from the hill you are. Again, I love using my Canon 24-105mm for its flexibility in this scenario. Again, I would recommend using a tripod here as well. It helps to set up a precise composition and it lets you experiment with longer exposures if you want. Especially if there are clouds moving across the sky, the long exposure effect will look gorgeous. Typically, I try to shoot away from the sun for soft, even light. Shooting into the sun creates a more contrasty silhouette style look, which I usually avoid for these kind of scenes. For these shots, a polarizing filter works wonders, enhancing colors, reducing glare and making skies more dramatic. So use one if you have one. For the camera settings, use the sharpest aperture your lens offers, often around f11, but that's different from lens to lens. You might check some charts about that online if you want to go down this rabbit hole. Shutter speed depends on wind and creative choice. Go short to freeze motion if it's windier, so trees and grass will stay sharp. Or experiment with 1 or 2 minute exposure for those dreamy long exposure effects. And change the ISO accordingly. I hope this video gave you some inspiration for your next spring photo shoot. Thank you for watching and happy shooting!